Have you ever stopped to think about how you start an engine that's the size of a building? You definitely don't use a key. Nope. It's all about a powerful invisible force, the ship's compressed air system. So let's get into it and see how this whole thing actually works.
All right, so let's really tackle that first big question. Picture this, an engine that is literally the size of a small building. You're not just going to walk up and turn a key like you would in your car, right? So how in the world do you get this absolute beast of a machine to even begin to turn over? The answer is a super powerful, perfectly timed blast of compressed air. That's it. This air is basically the starter motor on steroids. It delivers this incredible, massive punch of force that's needed to get those giant pistons moving from a dead stop.
Okay, but where does all this high-pressure air even come from? It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Let's actually follow its journey, starting from just regular old air in the atmosphere, and see how it gets transformed into this incredible stored power just waiting to be unleashed.
So, step 1. It all starts with these two big main compressors. Their one job? To suck in regular air from the atmosphere. This is the raw ingredient, the starting point for the entire high-pressure system we're going to break down.
Then, these compressors get to work. They just squeeze that air. They compress it, forcing all the molecules closer and closer together. And what happens when you do that? The pressure goes way, way up. You're basically creating this dense pocket of pure potential energy.
Now that you've got all this super pressurized air, you need somewhere to keep it, right? So it gets sent into these two huge tanks. They're called air receivers. And honestly, the best way to think of them is like giant power banks. They're just holding all that energy ready to go whenever you need it.
And get this, this is a key design detail that really shows you the kind of power we're dealing with. The whole system has to be able to charge both of these giant tanks from completely empty all the way up to full pressure in just 1 hour. That's some serious performance.
So, starting the engine is obviously the big dramatic job, right? But that's not all this system does. Not even close. This compressed air system is a total workhorse. It's powering a bunch of other critical things all over the ship, which really makes it one of the most vital systems on board.
It usually breaks down into 3 main jobs. First, you've got the starting air. That's the high-pressure stuff we've been focused on. Then, some of that air gets its pressure lowered to become service air. This is for everyday stuff, like running power tools or for cleaning. And finally, you have the control air. This stuff has to be super clean and dry because it's used for all the delicate, precise automation and control systems on the engine.
Okay, so this system is responsible for starting, for service, for control. You can see why it has to be incredibly reliable. Failure is just not an option. So it begs the question, what happens if the main power on the ship goes out? How do you make sure you can always start that engine?
Well, that's where the built-in backup comes in. You've got your 2 main compressors, and they run on the ship's normal power. But then you also have a separate, dedicated emergency compressor. It might be smaller, but its job is maybe the most important of all, to make absolutely sure there's always enough air to start that engine, no matter what else is going on.
And this is a perfect example of smart engineering and redundancy. The emergency compressor has its own power source. It's either a little diesel engine or it's hooked up to the ship's emergency generator. It's completely separate. This is the ultimate fail-safe, guaranteeing you can fire it up even if the rest of the ship is in a total blackout.
Now, you can probably guess that when you're dealing with these kinds of insane pressures, you can't just wing it. The whole thing is governed by really strict rules and engineering specs. It has to be, to keep the ship and the crew safe. So let's take a look at a few of those key rules.
Okay, first up, a really important design rule. The air tanks, those receivers, they have to be big enough to hold enough compressed air for at least 12 starts of the main engine. 12, and that's without needing to be refilled. Why? Because it gives the engineers plenty of chances to get the engine going, which is absolutely critical if you're in a tricky situation or dealing with an emergency.
Here's another big one, a real golden rule of the system. The line running from the compressors to the air tanks has to be completely dedicated. Nothing else can be connected to it, period. This makes sure that no other system can accidentally steal the pressure you need for starting the engine, plus it keeps the whole system clean and free from contamination.
All right, what about too much pressure? To prevent a really bad day, every single one of those air receivers has to have a safety relief valve. This is non-negotiable. It's a hard rule. These valves are designed to automatically pop open and bleed off pressure if it ever climbs more than 10% above the normal operating limit. It's a critical safety feature.
And finally, Let's talk about what this stuff is actually made of. The pipes that carry all this high-pressure air are a special type called Class II piping. What that means, in simple terms, is that they're built tough. We're talking thick-walled steel pipes, no seams, and top-quality welds. They have to be robust enough to handle that immense pressure, 24/7, without ever failing.
So, we've talked about all these different parts, the compressors, the tanks, the valves, and now let's see how they all come together in the real world. What you're looking at here is what's called a PNID, a piping and instrumentation diagram. This is the actual engineering blueprint. It shows how every single component we've talked about is connected, all laid out in one master plan.
So there you have it. It all comes down to a simple blast of air, harnessed to give a massive ship its very first breath. It's such a fundamental, foundational system. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? What other incredible, invisible systems are humming away in the background, just as vital for getting that ship safely across the ocean?